No, I'm not in the right age group. I am on social media because, I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and so on because I need to understand how a lot of that works. But yeah, you people are in the age group where you really understand social media. And even though I research and teach it, really people in your age group are the people who have taught me a lot about social media, and I'm still learning from you. So why did I start talking to young people? Well, I guess I've got a strong view that in the mainstream media, the traditional media, or what some people now call the vintage media, like newspapers and commercial TV and radio, there's a lot of things said about young people, often by experts like me from universities, or by psychologists, or by media commentators with really strong views about young people. And often what those people are saying when they talk about young people is a whole lot of negative stuff. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because I think that's interesting and I want to get your views on this. But it seemed to me very important in a whole range of debates to get young people's views into the debates and to really acknowledge young people and learn from them. And I think that young people today, which is a sort of old-fashioned statement, young people today, but I think that young people have a lot to tell us about the world around us. Well, I'll give you some examples here about how rapidly things have changed because this is before you guys were born, but I was a journalist for about 20 years. I worked as a newspaper journalist at the Sydney Morning Herald, and I worked as a TV journalist for ABC TV. And when I started working as a journalist after I finished my first university degree, computers had only just come into the newsroom. So can you imagine a world where you entered the workplace and there were still typewriters at people's desks? People were just adjusting to using computers. So this is the late 1980s. And this was a world in which if an event happened on the other side of the world, let's say an example, a real life example, is the Berlin Wall coming down. Some of you will have studied the fact that Berlin used to be divided into two. There was communist Berlin and there was Western democratic Berlin. And there was a wall between, right down the middle of Berlin. And in 1989, when I was a journalist, that wall came down. And that happened, of course, on the other side of the world. So Australians were asleep when that historic event happened, when people pulled that wall apart with their bare hands, brick by brick. Pretty dramatic events. But when I was a journalist, the only way you learned about that was through what was called the wire service. So there was literally an old-fashioned, what was called a telex machine. It's a very old-fashioned manual thing, a bit like a fax machine, if you've ever seen a fax machine, that is. And this information came in from overseas overnight. And it wasn't until Australians woke up the next morning that they picked up the newspaper and learned about this event, or they turned on the radio and heard the news. Now, of course, if that happened today, if a similar event like that happened today, let's say the Chinese Communist government fell, that regime fell, and there was a revolution in China. Let's just use an example there. Well, of course, we'd know about that immediately. And we wouldn't just go and turn on cable TV or listen to the radio. We'd know about that from Twitter and Facebook instantaneously, and people, real people on the ground, not just reporters, would be commenting on that live. So to put how social media has changed our world into perspective, I guess you'd say that we used to live fairly recently in a world where the only people who made media or produced important information were professional journalists. You know, people who worked for big corporations and had been trained, to go on TV and give information or entertain people, or wrote for newspapers or made radio programs. Today, media is produced all around us, and it's produced by people like you. You produce, I'm sure some of you do things like, apart from just maybe Facebooking or using Instagram or Snapchat or Tumblr, some of you might, blog on Tumblr, or you might have your own blogs, or you might even use Twitter, though it's not as popular in your age group. Every day you're probably producing media. You're sharing things with friends. It might be as simple as a picture or a video of your cat, or it might be something, that you found online that you think is really funny. You found on YouTube, for instance, and you want to share. Or it might be that you make your own videos. A lot of people, young people, do that. And so in a way, we're living in a world where all of you are media producers now. You're all producing media. And it's not just up to professional journalists to do that kind of thing. So, you really are right in the heart of a revolution that affects every aspect of our society. And one of the things I'll go on to talk about is that social media isn't just some giant distraction. It's actually equipping you with a set of skills that are going to be critical in the workplace. Which are really the skills of the future. And we can talk a bit about that. It might even give you a bit of pushback with your parents when they tell you to get off that screen, because I'm actually a believer in the fact that you're learning as much when you're engaging on social media as you are, reading a textbook. And we might come back to that. There's good evidence about that, actually. And I'll include video games in that, by the way. There's good evidence that video games are very good for learning to solve problems and so on. So, the usual doom and gloom scenario is not entirely true. So what I did was, very recently, I did a 1-year sort of project where I went into Australian high schools, 5 different high schools, all quite different from each other, and I talked to boys and girls aged, or young people I should say, aged 13 to 17. And in each school, with each group, I went back a second time. So I did what are called focus groups, which is where you get a group of about 5 or 6 young people together, and for an hour, hour and a half, I talked to them about social media. I talked about, social and online media, and I talked about how that fitted into how they formed intimate relationships, friendships, and how social and online media was really a part of how they form social relationships these days. And, to be honest, going into high schools, I was a little bit nervous because obviously I'm the same age as their mum. And, we know that, while you might talk to your mother or your father or whoever's your guardian about some things, talking to someone my age isn't always the preferred option. A lot of the time you're just going to be talking to friends or maybe a teacher that you trust. But to my surprise, what I found was that most of the young people in these focus groups really wanted to talk. So that was kind of a very strong message I got from young people. And one of the things they were telling me, if I said, well, where do you get information? They said apart from their friends, who they would often talk to, they often went to online and social media to get information, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It was interesting to me. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about what young people were telling me was that they felt that they spent a lot of time at school and sometimes at home with adults who just wanted to talk at them and tell them what to do and how to do it, and that they didn't feel very listened to. And I think one of the reasons they opened up to me about these issues was because actually I was really just there to listen. I wasn't there to judge. I feel really strongly that, well, to be honest, I think that education in high school and sometimes in universities, but less so in universities these days, sometimes is very structured and rigid, and maybe, we don't give enough space for young people to talk or to listen to them. A lot of it is, you guys are doing the HSC, right? And there's a lot of pressure that goes with that. I think we put young people under a lot of structured learning pressure, and, the way in which we're teaching people to learn may not, in fact, always be fitting them for jobs of the future. And maybe that's something we can talk about. Because the sort of jobs that our education system's framed around are not necessarily the jobs that are going to be there in 10 years. Yeah, but it was really, I've got to say, it was a real privilege and a pleasure talking to young people, and I was pretty amazed about how honest they were about the sort of stuff that happens on social media and how it fits into their lives. Because I think social media, when you read about it in the mainstream media, it's often panics about Facebook bullying. Well, that goes on, sure. Or people looking at porn on the internet. Well, sure, that happens, there was very little discussion, I think, in the mainstream media about the positives of social media and what it is that a lot of young people do with it on a daily basis. Well, I think social media can be a distraction, and I think it's not, often all these stories which are negative about social media, they're really aimed at young people, right? It's kind of like, well, it's a big distraction for young people. I mean, the truth is that most grown-ups now, when they're sitting at their desk at work, are flicking between Facebook or Twitter or whatever else. And, like my 14-year-old laughed his head off at me the other day because I went into his room. I knew he'd been on, he uses Logic Pro to make music, which is his big thing. He loves doing that. And he was there with his headphones in. He'd been there for 3 hours doing that, and I knew he had an exam the next day. So I went in with a bowl of pasta and I said, hey, Sam, look, come on, you've done that for 3 hours. I think you need to get off your screen. And I was doing that with my mobile phone in one hand, and I was like checking my Twitter feed while I was talking to him. And he just said, Mum, you're a giant hypocrite. Every time I come downstairs, you're doing email or you're on your Twitter feed or you're, So I think that, sure, social media can be a distraction for all of us. And I'll come back to this because I think time management is something that you guys need to be careful about. But, I mean, we all need to be careful about it. There are skills that you're actually learning through interacting with online and social media, which are core skills you're going to have to take into the workplace and hopefully into university. Because hopefully some of you are thinking about doing uni degrees. I think university is a fantastic place to find yourself. It's a great place not just to learn about, a profession you want to go into, but it's also a great place to learn more about yourself. And university learning is about meeting other people, different people, maybe from where you grow up, because we all grow up with a particular identity, and sometimes it's great to meet people from other backgrounds. And there's a whole lot of things you learn at university which aren't just about passing exams or writing reports or essays or whatever. I hope some of you are thinking about that. But there are definitely time management skills that you need to have for university and for the workplace. But that's not about saying all of social and online media is bad. It's about learning to manage and incorporate that, because you're going to have to do that for the rest of your life. Social media is not going anywhere. I just want to give an anecdote. If we're talking about skills in the workplace, so one of the subjects I teach at Macquarie University is called social media. And I'm a ex-journalist, I'm a media professor, so I teach people how to be journalists, but increasingly how to be media content producers. Because where the jobs of the future are, they're not necessarily working in a newspaper or going and getting a cadetship at your local radio or TV station. Though there are jobs like that, but increasingly there are less jobs like that. So if you were going to go into the media, if you wanted to do a media and communications degree and be a media professional, these days what that would probably look like is you'd be working for an organisation that might do a range of things. They might produce or curate, that is, put together different news sources and produce news, but they might also be writing social media strategies for organisations that come to them. So an organisation will come along, they might be a commercial organisation, they might be a not-for-profit, and they say, we want to promote what we're doing, or we want to raise funds, we want to raise awareness about what we're doing. And so your job might be to design a social media strategy. So to work out, should you use Twitter, should you use Facebook, should you use Snapchat, Instagram, what are the best platforms for them? What kind of content should they be pushing out? What does that look like? How do you time it? There's a whole range of things like that. So social, and those sorts of skills are required not just in media organisations, they're required in health, education, kind of any career you can think about now. Understanding social media and being able to use it in a strategic way, in an intelligent way, is actually a core skill set. And the people who really have that skill set at the moment are few and far between. So one of the first things is just by using social media on a daily basis and thinking about what it's good for and what it's not good for, and different platforms are good for different things, right? You go to different platforms for different reasons. Having a good understanding of that, which your generation does, is an invaluable kind of skill now right across the workplaces of the present and certainly of the future. I think in terms of time management, certainly my tip would be to write a plan. I'm sure you've been told that you need to write plans, but really that becomes even more critical in the age of social media and online media, because there's so many screens to go to and so many places to go. So the first thing is, when you're studying, write a plan where, we all have this tendency to think, well, I'll put it off, and and you get sort of sucked into online and social media, and, suddenly you've watched YouTube videos for 5 hours. So I think one of the tips is, and a proven sort of technique, is to write yourself a plan for after school or on your StuVac study days, where you give yourself an hour of intensive planned study and then give yourself a break completely. Give yourself an hour then to go onto social media. Keep an eye on the time. So that's the first thing. It might sound basic, but actually it makes a lot more sense when you've got a lot of distraction. So certainly set up a plan. Social media is a very quick and easy way to get people to help with questions and to share ideas and advice. So one of the things you might want to consider is setting up a Facebook group with people in your class, which is, devoted to particular topics that you're studying at the time. That can be incredibly effective, so that you're using social media for study-related purposes. The sooner the better that people in your generation can harness that and think, talk to your friends, but talk actively about how you might want to use a Facebook group or however you want to connect in a kind of collective, that can be a useful thing, and it helps you feel connected with friends while you're studying, and and it breaks the boredom and the isolation that we all feel when we have to sit down, and we've got the mountain to climb of, okay, the next exam is English, and I've got, a play and 4 books and 2 films and, whatever else to learn. And, I think it's really important to keep a sort of connected sense of community, because I think that helps break that monotony. Rather than seeing social media as purely about entertainment or as being a giant distraction, also understand that one of the things that social media is always giving you is a set of skills of multitasking and of learning to juggle multiple screens and multiple pieces of information simultaneously. And don't lose sight of that, in fact. I mean, don't let people tell you that there's the world of social media over here and there's the world of education over here. In fact, these things are interconnected, and I think it's important to see, to embrace that and to see that it's a positive thing. But think about how you can, ensure that you give yourself time for memorising or for preparing essays or for those things that you have to do for the HSC. Secondly, think about how you can use social media productively to form groups and depending on your preferred form of social media, to share tips, to share ideas, to ask quick questions, and the third thing is to actually embrace the fact that education is not separate to social media, that as I've really emphasised, the skills that your generation is immersed in are skills which are now critical in the workplace of the future. And increasingly in universities, those things are a part of how you're going to be learning. And in good learning environments at university, the lecturers will be using a Twitter feed while they're talking. They won't just talk at you, they'll be interactive, and people will be posting stuff the whole time on a Twitter feed asking questions, or they'll use other forms of social media. They'll be using Facebook to connect with students for more informal stuff for learning. Please don't see social media as separate from education. I think in good educational environments, it's integrated. And certainly when I in my classroom, if everyone's got their laptop open or they're looking at their phone, I don't take that as a personal insult. I see that as, I might say, hey, do you want to, let's get onto Twitter if people are more comfortable asking questions that way. But I think that we've got to embrace it and integrate it into the world of learning. So I think one of the skills that you're learning on social media, they're very critical communication skills, essentially. If you think about it, Facebook is really different, say, to Instagram, obviously, to Snapchat. Whenever you're using different social media platforms, whether you know it or not, you're actually adapting your communication style to that platform. So one of the interesting things about social media is, say, we know obviously Instagram is very visual, and we live in a very visual world. So one of the things that Instagram is getting you to think about is how do you engage people? That's the first thing on social media. How do you get likes? How do you engage people with a post? How do you get someone's attention with a photograph? How do you get someone's attention on YouTube with a video? They're communication skills, but increasingly communication is not just one way. It's about the quality of engagement with other people. So how you're getting people's attention is a very core communication skill now. And communication, as I said, is not a one-way process. It's not a corporation or a professional talking at a mass group of people. It's now about a conversation. So what it's getting you to think about all the time is, what is this platform for? What works on this platform? What speaks to the audience I want to pull in? And that's something that you've actually been building skills in for a very long time. And to give you a quick example of this, I had a guest lecturer in who runs a company. They have a YouTube license. So what he does is he manages YouTube talent. He looks for talent on YouTube, and he goes to them and he manages them, and he helps them get advertisers and sponsors on YouTube. He has a 10-year-old girl at the moment called Grace. Grace's world is her her YouTube channel if you want to have a look, Grace's World. She makes so much money that both her parents quit their jobs. They bought a bigger house and a very fancy car. Grace is 10 and her YouTube channel is just her playing with Barbie dolls. There's another example. I mean, there are lots of examples of these YouTube talent people who are making a lot more than mainstream entertainers. So that's about, on YouTube, thinking about, well, what works on YouTube? What goes viral? How do you engage people? And that's a kind of core skill set that you've been building throughout any use of social media, even if you're not conscious of it. And that's critical in the workplace. How do you find your stakeholders, your audience? How do you engage people? How do you promote what it is you're doing as an individual or as an organisation? How do you engage people? Because it's not just about talking at them, it's about how do you get them interested in what you're doing and how do you get them to share? Because sharing is at the heart of social media, likes and shares and followers. As I said, we're in a world where, you know, what we did at 14 or what you guys did at 14 is probably still traceable. So one of the things you've got to start thinking about, I think, particularly as you're leaving high school and so on, is how do you want to use social media? If you're targeting a particular profession or an area of professional practice, starting to think about how you manage the professional and the personal aspects of your social media accounts. So one of the things you might want to think about, if you haven't already done this, is that you might want to split your Facebook profile, for instance. You might want to have one that's just for friends, and a lot of professionals do this, that's just for friends with really strong privacy settings, and then a Facebook profile which is much more about connecting with future employers, which is about curating or bringing together, if you like, information and stuff that is about, it's a silly word, but branding yourself or getting yourself sort of set up as somebody who's interested in a particular field. And if you think about, say, Twitter, I mean, one of the things on Twitter is that you wouldn't use it for the sort of things you'd do on Facebook. So it's thinking about being careful about how you appear on different social media platforms. Twitter is, people who use Twitter well aren't tweeting about what their cat ate for breakfast. They're either sharing useful information, they might be discussing politics, or they're connecting with communities of similar professional interest. So it's beginning to think in a strategic way about how, as an adult, you're going to manage your social media profile and separating out the private, keeping it really private, and then thinking carefully about how you present that other persona, which is the more professional persona. Doesn't mean you can't still have, your private areas of social media, but you've got to look at your privacy settings and check them regularly because, the big global corporations who own social media platforms are really good at changing things without telling us, unfortunately. And they own our information, that's the thing. They're not free. It looks like they're free, but actually they're data mining us every minute of the day. They can probably tell what colour underpants you're wearing. My advice is that that's why I'm saying you need a study plan. And I think you need to reward yourself, and social media is a form of reward, just like having that chocolate biscuit. And you actually need to timetable it. And one of the things I think you need to do is, shut down the internet for a certain period of time. I mean, it's difficult if you're researching things online, and then it's very tempting to go into social media and so on. And that's where you have to kind of really be disciplined. But if you don't need the internet, maybe do your internet research, shut down the internet, and then do the other kind of work. And look, that might sound basic, but actually planning ahead for that is important, because if you just leave it to chance, what's going to happen is you'll drift onto those, YouTube videos, and who doesn't? I do it. And suddenly, you're knee deep in cat videos or in, people doing ridiculous things and falling on their face, and you've been doing it for 4 hours, and it's very easy to go down that rabbit hole. I mean, look, I think rather than relying on software to block stuff, I would be recommending that what you're practicing is the art of using social media when it's part of your study is useful, but of rewarding yourself by going onto social media, but timing it. I mean, it's better if you're learning those skills and you're reliant on software to block it, but you can get software that will time you out. And in fact, often that's what parents install, not young people. And I think it's better for young people to be learning those skills because, as I said, you're going to need them in the workplace because everyone faces these challenges, not just people studying for the HSC. I just want to say good luck, guys. I know it's a really, it feels like crunch time, but one of the things I really hope you all remember is that there are lots of pathways into university these days, and there are lots, that the HSC does not determine your life. It's not the be-all and end-all. I hope you all achieve what you want to achieve, but that there are lots of pathways into university and lots of pathways into jobs. Because these days most people are going to have 10 jobs in their lifetime. They're not going to just leave school and have one job for the rest of their life. Thank you.